Thank you, Jack, for that generous eulogy. And thank you, Bill and Bruce, for and all the other sponsors for gathering us together today. If we could cue up my my presentation, that'd be great. And you know, Mark Twain had a saying that prediction is difficult, especially when it's about the future. And I do think, you know, if we're to make a prediction now, I really feel that this decade, when we look back at it, you know, years from now, will be seen as the turning point from 2010 to 2020. And you just think particularly the year we've had in renewable energy, what's going on, you know, beginning with the Clean Power Plan last summer, getting launched by the Obama administration, the passage of the 50% renewable portfolio standard, which really, you know, gets us to majority renewables after 2030 and flips the script. You know, fossil fuels will be the alternative energy, and renewables will be mainstream. That's where we're going. And we, you know, extended the net metering program here in California. You see cities like San Diego adopting 100% clean energy mandate, you know, by 2035. And then the extension of the federal and solar wind tax credits for another 5 years. So just an incredible period we're in, and schools have an extraordinary role to play. So look, my contention is that schools should be the pace car in the clean energy race. And really what we want schools are about the future, and they should be modeling the future that we're heading toward. And that really means to me 100% renewable energy and being energy and water efficient. I mean, every school should have that goal. And you know, I want to again acknowledge, you know, Jack's work. I guess we should call you the $80 billion man for that 55% threshold. You said the resources to get where we need to go for our facilities are so critical. And I think this is an extraordinary moment we have now. If you think about that Prop 39 combined with the good work of this latest Prop 39 for solar efficiency on school, I think we should just, whatever big initiative we do next, if we want it to pass, we should name it Prop 39. It's a great legacy. So I want to give a little bit of context, okay? And starting with what's happened in coal power, because it's absolutely extraordinary. If you go back to 2011, right, coal was the majority of the United States electricity supply, and the majority of that coal came from just 4 companies, Peabody, Arch, Alpha, and Cloud Peak, okay? So in the years since then, since 2011, their combined market cap has fallen by 99%. Okay, that's the steepest decline in value in the history of the energy industry. 3 of those 4 companies that are listed there are bankrupt, Peabody, Arch, and Alpha. Peabody just went bankrupt last Wednesday. An incredible turn of events. And just to, you know, remember, coal has powered the world for, you know, the last 200 years. I mean, Great Britain, the British Empire wouldn't have been possible without its coal reserves. Germany wouldn't have been able to, you know, fight and wage 2 world wars without coal reserves. Coal was actually decisive to the outcome of the U.S. Civil War. The North had a 28-to-1 coal advantage. It's obviously powered our economy for years and continues to power China and India. But that is changing, and we're building a future that's brighter and healthier. And so this past year, for the first time ever, renewable energy represented the majority of new electric generation capacity in the United States, 65%. And it's a great sign, and due in large part to the cost reductions we're seeing now in wind and solar. In California, you know, when we launched our bold clean energy program, there were a lot of critics that said, well, it's going to crash your economy. And just, I want to just show this because as GDP has gone up and population has gone down, our greenhouse gas emissions have actually gone down. And greenhouse gas emissions per capita have gone down even more steeply. And if you think about the mythology more generally that was propagated, there are basically 3 arguments the critics were making, Koch brothers and others, that it's going to crash your economy, right? And California's this big experiment. Well, what's happened? Actually, economic growth has been faster in California than the rest of the country. We actually, they said unemployment's going to skyrocket. Well, what's happened? We've cut unemployment in half the last 5 years in California, all right? Job growth is faster in California. And they'd say, oh, there's going to be rolling blackouts. Okay, we have not had any statewide rolling blackouts since 2001, and that was due to market manipulation from Enron, thank you very much, right? So just to stop and assess, you know, what was said versus what's happened, it's really important to see this experiment is working. I got into renewable energy actually first. I worked for President Nelson Mandela when he was had just come into office in 1997 in South Africa. It was about 2.5 years after the end of apartheid. And I was in a township in the Eastern Cape that had no mail service. And one of the first things that the ANC government did when they came into power, they provided these postal stations with a solar roof and a battery bank, and they were lit up at night, and people could actually send mail to, this is kind of before the age of email, really, back and forth. And I just got excited about the potential of solar to kind of leapfrog other technologies, and I looked into it, and I learned every time demand for solar power doubles, the price goes down. The demand doubles globally, the price goes down 20%. And we've been doubling the market roughly every 3 to 4 years. And I wanted to get involved in helping grow demand. And I then went to work for Willie Brown in San Francisco. Funny story about Willie Brown. He was the only mayor of a big city that I'd ever heard of who left his phone number, his home phone number, listed in the white pages. And this woman calls him at 3 in the morning to say that her street light is out and she'd like it fixed. And he wakes up, gets the information, gets it fixed, and then the next morning he sets his alarm clock for 3 in the morning, calls her back and says it's fixed. So he was a colorful character to work for. So we did have rolling blackouts in San Francisco in 2001, and every crisis also presents an opportunity. So we put together this $100 million bond to pay for energy efficiency and solar on public buildings. You can see the airport now in San Francisco is covered with solar, the Moscone Convention Center, Sunset Reservoir, and we shut down both of the fossil fuel burning power plants in San Francisco. One point I want to make just about federal subsidies for fossil fuels. We have spent the vast majority of federal subsidies for fossil fuels, okay? And I think people often ask what I consider to be the wrong question, which is, what's the subsidy this year? I actually think the right question is, what's the all-in subsidy since subsidies began, right? And when you look at that, there's fundamentally 3 differences between, and sorry, the graphic here is a little bit messed up, but basically the oil depletion allowance started in 1926 and continues in perpetuity, right? So that's probably the most important difference, is that oil subsidies and gas subsidies, they just go on in perpetuity. They don't need to be reauthorized. The wind and solar tax credits are intermittent, and they're fewer, and they are constantly stopping and starting, and so you have much less certainty. So what we're doing in California in many ways is to make up for the imbalance in the playing field nationally. So just important to bear that in mind. I also want to point out, I think we're in a moment where we should all have a sense of great possibility about public opinion on climate moving in the right direction. I mention this because I think what's happened with marriage equality is a great example of a quite radical change of public opinion that happened over a very compressed period of time. If you go back 12 years ago, marriage equality was legal nowhere in the United States, and I think most of us, certainly myself included, have we been asked, is that going to be legal in all 50 states in 12 years? We said, no way. But as the advocates won state by state by state by state, and then ultimately at the Supreme Court level, they won both the policy and the public opinion. And the way they did that is by really framing the issue and making it clear it's about love, and government has no right to get between 2 people who love each other. And I actually think in the climate movement, it's also about love. It's about love of the next generation. And that we need to actually take some notes from how that campaign won. And I think also with technology, we should realize we're in a great age of possibility. I mentioned the iPhone. Raise your hand if you have an iPhone. Yeah, that's almost everybody in the room. So this device did not exist 10 years ago. This year, Apple is on track to manufacture their 1 billionth iPhone, right? And if you just think about this thing that's a computer, a calendar, and a stopwatch, and a calculator, and flashlight, and a map, and tape recorder, and video game, and movie player, and camera, and radio, and by the way, a phone also. It's extraordinary, and I think we should have this sense of possibility both for technology and for what can happen in public opinion when we look at where we are in the energy scene today. So just to recap, we were at the first goal for renewable energy in California was set to get us to 20% renewables by 2013. All right. Then that was raised to 33% by 2020, which was the first law Governor Brown came in to sign in 2011. And then just this past fall, 50% by 2030, which, as I mentioned, does really flip the script and make fossil fuels the alternative energy. And we know what works. To bring down costs, you have to have this long-term certainty, and that basically unlocks a lot of investment, allows innovation to happen. As a result of these laws and the other laws like California Solar Initiative for the distributed generation, California now leads the United States in renewables installed. And so we've put in more renewables than any other state in the country. Texas is second because of wind. They've done a fabulous job with wind in Texas. And our economy is growing and healthy. So I want to just hit energy efficiency really briefly, because if you go back 40 years, the Energy Commission was born exactly 40 years ago. Some things were not so different. The governor was a guy by the name of Jerry Brown, who had replaced a moderate Republican movie star, at that time Ronald Reagan, this last time was Schwarzenegger. And California was in an energy crisis. Actually, electric demand was growing at 8% a year. And so the legislature actually commissioned the RAND Corporation to look at this challenge, or what do we do? And they studied it, and they came back and said, look, the answer is build 40 nuclear plants. So we have an 800-mile coastline. That would have been one nuclear plant every 20 miles. And the legislature said, no, we're going to get serious about efficiency. We're going to get serious about alternative energy. The Energy Commission was born with that mandate. And on energy efficiency, the red line shows the United States energy use. The blue line is up until 40 years ago, and then we got all these savings from commercial, industrial, and residential, and now we're using half the energy per capita of the rest of the country. We have the strictest building and appliance energy codes in the United States. We have one nuclear plant in California today, not 40, and it's been a big success. And I think it's particularly important to note in an age where government is really being demonized, that it is possible to have these kind of success stories where you really set a stable long-term policy platform and it delivers results. The refrigerator was the first efficiency appliance that we actually mandated. We said you can't sell your refrigerators into California until they meet the strict energy code. The refrigerator industry said, no, we're going to collapse. This business is going to lead to say, well, this is what happened. This is the energy use of refrigerators until the standard went into effect. The energy use plummets. At the same time, the cost of the refrigerator, the price went down, and the size of the refrigerator went up, right? Same thing with televisions, which we regulated in 2009. It basically said, and because we have 40 million people, by the way, when we set an energy code like this, the manufacturers don't want to run one manufacturing line just for California and one for the other states. They, in many cases, upgrade their whole line for all of North America or globally. We set that standard in 2009, cuts energy use of TVs in half, saves $1 billion a year for California ratepayers. Same thing with plug-in charger device. If you have a phone or a shaver in 2012, up till that time, and before 2012, you plug the device into the wall. When it's fully charged, it would still be sucking a little bit of power. Why? Because there's a 25-cent shutoff diode that the manufacturer is electing not to install because they don't care. They don't pay the energy bill. We do. So we said, no, you can't. Your product's not legal to sell here until you install that. It saves $300 million a year. So all of this means fewer power plants, right? Which is the goal. So I want to show you this slide from the Department of Energy, which is really representing the downward cost trends of all of what I'd call the foundational technologies of a clean energy future, which is wind power, distributed PV, utility scale PV, battery costs, and LEDs. And they're all headed the right direction. And it's, I think, a very promising trend and a lot more cost reduction yet to come. In California with renewables, I want to just reiterate how quickly this transition is happening. We were at only 12% renewables in 2008. We're at about 26% now statewide. And, this is happening quickly. And if you, for the average person, they don't see anything change with the grid. It's actually been very stable. So I want to give you a quick tour, a California clean energy tour, where these projects are, just to give you a sense. So this is the largest thin film solar PV project in the world called Desert Sunlight. 550 megawatts in Riverside County. And even over the course of construction of this one project, there was all of this innovation. So with the southern end of this field, all the modules, when they started, they all had a frame. Halfway through the project, they figured out how to eliminate the frame. There's a savings there. This entire site was graded. Okay, that's 15% of the project cost. Going forward, they figured out how to avoid grading. And even the efficiency in PV, to be on a single axis tracker, you have to have a high enough efficiency. And so these are all fixed tilt. They, halfway through this project, First Solar got to the efficiency point where now most of their projects are on trackers going forward, right? So all this innovation just over the course of one project. This is the SunPower project. At the time it was built, it was the world's largest silicon PV project. It's now the third largest. This is the one that's now the largest in China, and I mention this because I remember being in the solar field in 2004, and it was big news that the whole global solar market had surpassed 1 gigawatt for the year. Well, that's smaller than this one project today in China. That's how quickly PV is growing. How many of you have seen this project, the Ivanpah project? Raise your hand if you've been out of the Las Vegas airport. Okay, so this is the world's largest solar thermal tower project. You're looking at 3 550-foot towers with a boiler on top, surrounded by 173,000 mirrors that focus the light on top. When it's energized, it's the second brightest thing visible from the face of the Earth after the sun. You can't look at it without sunglasses. This technology is now much more expensive than PV. When the contract for this was won, they were roughly comparable. What's happened is PV prices have fallen, so it's roughly, solar PV is about half the cost of this now. But this is the largest of its kind in the world, and this is the world's largest solar thermal trough power plant. This is not new, actually. This is the SEGS project, and it's 350 megawatts, been operating for 30 years, which I think is a real testimony to the durability of renewables. And we also are home to the world's largest geothermal power plant. The geysers up in Napa, a gigawatt in size, roughly comparable to the annual demand of a city like San Francisco. This facility is actually really badly damaged, unfortunately, in the recent fires. And California has the world's largest wind project, the Alta Wind Energy Center in Kern County. And if you're a native Californian, like me, you hear Kern County, you think oil. Well, actually the second largest taxpayer in Kern County is this project. And they're a hotbed as well for a lot of solar projects, including some solar schools, as we were just talking about. And biomass, we're leading the nation in biomass. This is how they get biomass material into the plant, by the way. This is a project called Honey Lake. When I was visiting, the driver got in trouble because he stayed in the cab of the truck with his son to experience the ride. So, but I think this is very significant. Basically, every clean energy technology category, we have the largest project in the world, and really this needs to become part of our identity as California. It's something we're really proud of, because this is really the energy of the future. One other trend I want to highlight is actually a success story in reducing the impact of renewables. All sources of electricity generation have an impact. And so even renewables like wind. This is a project about 2 hours away from here called Vasco. They had 432 of these older turbines. You remember the older ones had the lattice structure, which was a perching opportunity for the birds, right? And very, very high RPM, about 45 RPM. And they repowered, which means they removed all of those turbines, replaced them with just 34 of the new turbines, which are higher, solid steel column, much lower RPM. And they tripled the energy production, and they cut the bird kill by 70%. So a real success story there. In new construction, California also leads the world in terms of solar on new homes. We're building about 100,000 new homes a year in California, particularly in Southern California. About 27% of the homes being built include solar. And it's been what I'd call the sort of gateway drug to get the builders into designing and building green living communities, where they're using technologies I had never even thought of, like wrapping the shower drain pipe to recover the heat from your used shower water, and they use that to preheat your hot water tank. Saves $500 a year. They're doing all LED lights, double pane windows, but it sort of started with solar and then expanded. And there's so much job creation going on that now, for the first time, there are more employees in the solar industry in California than all of our utilities, publicly owned and investor-owned utilities combined. Right? That's the only state where that's true in the country, and we're at about 75,000 solar workers now, projected to get to 90 by December. So a real bright spot in our economy. In terms of renewables statewide that are going to be procured by the utilities, I want to just show you what's happening. The single biggest change is the expansion of solar PV. This tan band in the middle, solar PV combined with solar thermal, basically solar is going to be about half of all the electricity generation that's procured by utilities by 2020, and that's mostly a function of the decline in cost of solar PV. So we've seen, really since 1980, a 98% reduction in the price of a solar panel. So energy storage obviously becomes increasingly important when you have, this sort of separation from the pack that wind and solar have really, really separated from biomass and geothermal and other renewables. But these two sources are intermittent. Storage becomes even more important. So we have a storage program in California to get to 1.3 gigawatts by 2020. This is the Tesla battery factory that's being built in Nevada. And this is the second largest building in the world that's being built, right? So that's really, if you think about how cost comes down in clean energy, it's three things. It's innovation, it's automation, and it's scale. And three of those things are happening, but scale is actually the most important. So I'm very bullish about the future of energy storage. We're seeing some other really exciting examples of cities getting out ahead of the state. So right now the state code mandates solar ready. So you have to have 250 square feet on your roof if you build a new home that's ready for solar, but it doesn't have to, we're not yet, until there's zero net energy code by 2020, it's not yet mandated. Cities like Lancaster have actually required it. And just last week, San Francisco voted to do the same thing. Cannot build a new building in San Francisco or Lancaster without a solar roof. Just in terms of advice for schools, as we think about the opportunity, I think paying very close attention to rate design has never been more important. And this chart here, which is a little bit hard to read, just shows the increase in the demand charge in Southern California Edison territory, and it's something like 30 to 40% increase. And so if you think about how rates work today, agriculture rates are very low, and that's because the agricultural community really mobilized and organized and focused, and they got a very successful result relative to other groups in California. And I'd love to see that for the schools, because it's not just the increase of demand charge, but other rates like the A6 that we're talking about is now gone, and so things like solar only pay off if you have a rate design that allows for that, right? And so just being very focused on that process at the PUC is going to be critical. And then considering pairing solar with storage for where you do have a demand charge, and storage can really, I think, make a lot of economic sense now for schools. Just jumping back to energy efficient homes, we're seeing as the default rate, as you build more efficient homes, actually reduces the default rate. There's one study that said it was about 32% lower default rate in energy efficient homes because customers have more money to pay their energy bills. And we're seeing some new solar customers. Bill mentioned President Obama put solar in the White House last Earth Day, and just a month ago, the governor put solar on the executive mansion, governor's mansion up in Sacramento. The largest manufacturing plant in California today is an electric vehicle factory, the Tesla plant. How many of you remember the NUMMI plant that used to be there? Yeah. So if you recall, that plant in Fremont, the old NUMMI plant, which is a joint venture, GM Toyota, employed 5,000 people. And when they closed their doors in 2010, everyone said that's the end of car manufacturing in California. Tesla came in, bought the facility. They employ 12,000 people now. And we have 200,000 electric vehicles on the road today. The new Model 3 that Tesla just introduced, which is a $35,000 car that goes 215 miles on a charge, has 400,000 people have paid $1,000 to reserve for that. So incredible momentum with that. And this is part of what I would say, the electrification of almost everything, which is a really important element to our future. And Bill just mentioned Stanford now has gotten off natural gas for space heating and water heating. And this is part of a broader movement to electrify. At the Energy Commission, we've funded electric bus companies like Proterra that have a bus that goes 100 miles on a charge and recharges in 20 minutes. Electric motorcycle companies like Zero Motorcycles. And then this is the Model 3 here. It took me, I actually signed up for that, and it took me a week to get my wife to agree to put the 1,000, and during that week, like 300,000 people signed up on the wait list, and now it's like another 3 years. But also, even the electrification of bicycles, I am a really, really slow biker. I'm like the last person you'd want, racing the Tour de France. And I had my 10-year-old daughter on the back in one of those half bikes that kind of clips on, and I got this electric bike, and I'm passing this guy, who is dressed like he's racing the Tour de France with matching outfits and stuff. He didn't see I had an electric bike. He just saw me pass him with a kid on my back. I felt great, We're also now seeing an interesting trend of all-electric homes being built. This is a builder in Southern California called City Ventures, and they're building homes with no gas appliances. So there's typically 4 appliances in your home that use gas: your furnace, your hot water heater, in some cases your dryer, and your stove. And the biggest customer barrier is the stove. People are used to cooking with a gas range. I have a gas range. I like it. I'm comfortable with it. The new electric induction ovens are amazing. They heat up really quickly, cool instantly. And so what this builder is, they bring in a 4-star chef to cook an amazing meal on the electric stove for all these prospective home buyers, and they're selling like hotcakes. But they're finding it's a $4,500 avoided cost, which is the savings you get from not having to run the gas service to the house and then pipe inside your house. And if you just think about what just happened with the Aliso Canyon leak, okay, this was the BP oil spill for the gas industry. It was the largest accidental greenhouse gas emissions event in American history. And just, it was only over 4 months, but I'm saying, like, we have the strictest energy codes in the United States. We work really hard on that. We get a lot of savings from that. I mean, I asked my team to evaluate how many years that undid. It basically undid like 12 years of our Title 24 building codes just from that one event. And so to me, this really highlights the need to accelerate, to move beyond natural gas where we can. Some great momentum with companies like Google and Apple and Facebook committing to 100% renewables. I think Apple's already at 93% now. They are scaling up. They're actually building solar and wind projects in northern China to power the Foxconn factory where iPhones are made. And then in the military, actually great momentum. We have about 30 military bases in California. The Navy, which has really particularly distinguished itself from the other services in this regard, has a goal to get to 50% renewables by 2020. Remember, our statewide goal is 50% by 2030. And then the Marines have a goal to get to 0 fossil fuel use on their base. They'll still use fuel for the missions, but they want the base to not have any fuel use by 2025. So some very bold things happening with the military in California. We're moving to high-speed rail in California as part of this electrification. That will be all electric and 100% renewable. Every single station on the California high-speed rail network will be a zero-net energy building. And of course, we're also seeing the electrification of rail like Caltrains coming down here. Just a reminder of how quickly this transition can happen. I built this slide just to show, it took General Motors over a century to become a $50 billion company. Tesla started in 2003, and they're already like 3/4 of the way there. And you just, can project that out, and you can really see, this is the future. At the same time, there is still a lot of churn within the renewable industry. And I had a friend who said something that really stuck with me. He said he's never been so certain that clean energy would be our future, but also so certain about which companies within that space would be the ones to make it happen. But I think the trend is clear. It's happening rapidly. I'm going to blow through this stuff on the drought real quick. We've saved a lot of water on savings. Let me just, I want to just close with a couple success stories, and then have to take a few questions. So I grew up in the summers going to visit my grandfather, who lived in the Adirondack Park in upstate New York, largest state park in the United States, 1,800 lakes, and they suffered hugely from acid rain. In the Midwest in the 70s, to deal with a local air pollution problem, their response was build higher smokestacks. right? Which helped with the local air pollution, but got the pollution up into the jet stream. It came down and just killed these lakes, so they couldn't support fish life. And then President Bush Sr., to his great credit, in 1990, signed this acid rain bill, and it worked. And we've seen about a 70% reduction in acid rain, and those lakes that were dying or dead in the Adirondacks are coming back to life. So it's a huge success story and a reminder that policy can work. And the same thing, by the way, with the ozone hole. If you remember that problem of the chlorofluorocarbons causing this hole in the ozone, exposing us to greater risk of cancer, the world came together in 1987 and signed the Montreal Protocol. And now we're on a path to see the ozone hole completely restore by 2050. But I think the analogy that's most appropriate for where we are with fossil fuels and renewables is actually what happened with smoking in the United States. So we gave cigarettes for free to every soldier as part of daily rations in World War II, right? Johnny Carson smoked on The Tonight Show. Fred Flintstone smoked. Doctors did ads for cigarettes. President Kennedy smoked. Marilyn Monroe smoked. Some people say they smoked together. And it took you guys a little while. But then the science came out that, hey, smoking causes cancer, and secondhand smoke causes cancer. And the response of the tobacco industry was interesting because they went from basically manufacturing one product, cigarettes, to manufacturing two products, cigarettes and doubt. And they spent $100 million on junk science to distort that basic truth. And the effect, I think, is very instructive because what happened is it took a while, but ultimately the truth got out and got accepted, and it led to this cascade of policies from health warnings on packages to banning cigarette advertising on television to doubling the cigarette tax to banning smoking on airplanes to banning sales to minors to banning smoking in bars or in restaurants and so forth. CVS just last year, banned all cigarette sales at all 7,500 of their stores. And today, the smoking rate has fallen to 15%, projected to fall to 12% by 2020. It's really one of the single biggest success stories, public health success stories in our country's history. And I think that's actually the path we're on with fossil fuels. So I'll stop there and we'll take questions. Thank you so much. If there's any questions on California or anything else you saw? Yeah, go ahead.
So, what's your perspective on the electric utility industry? And, say
so the
what's your perspective on the electric utility industry and the tension with the solar industry sometimes on rate design and where we can collaborate in other areas?
Yeah, well, just in general, I would say there's not been nearly as much innovation in the utility business model as there has been in renewable technology, right? And so this is an area of great need. One of the things that's, I think, going to change that picture considerably is the advance of community choice aggregation, which is sort of a halfway point between public power and the conventional investor-owned utilities. And there's a lot of innovation happening now. So there's 3 CCAs that are up and running in Lancaster, Sonoma, and Marin, and they're delivering cleaner power at lower cost and doing a lot of innovation and experimentation. Even things like Sonoma's talked about even selling electric cars through your electric bill, right? And things that may not actually work, but they're even asking those questions. I think that's a healthy process. But one thing that's clear, the public wants to see rooftop solar. And that has very strong support. I mean, this latest vote on net metering, which the utilities fought with a tremendous amount of energy, there were more public comments in support of that net metering extension than any other issue in the 100-year history of the PUC, right? So this is really coming to bear. But I think long term, my own view, and there's different perspectives about this. I mean, what I really think needs to happen is I think the electric utilities today need to actually stop fighting on this kind of policy and get aggressively behind electrifying transportation, because that's actually a business growth opportunity for them. If you were to actually double, I mean, basically, Mark Jacobson, who's a very highly regarded professor here at Stanford, did this study. If you electrify everything in the state, what happens is we go from a 60 gigawatt load to 130 gigawatt load. So there's actually a big opportunity. And now, you know, I mentioned Tesla, but GM is coming out with the Bolt in October. They're beating Tesla to the punch with a mainstream electric vehicle, 200 miles on a charge, $35,000. I mean, that really offers some opportunities, and I think that's the path I'd love to see the utilities to sort of team up with the renewable energy community on taking customers away from the oil industry, in short. Yeah, go ahead, Gopal.
Yeah, so David, you mentioned community choice aggregation. And you mentioned rate design too. The end customer doesn't understand, I don't understand my PG&E bills, right? And this is my life.
Yeah.
So there's the generation component, there's transmission, distribution, everything else. The compensation, if you have solar on your rooftop, is different for the CCA and the utility, so the incumbent utility. Where do we start on a conversation? Because they're all living in different worlds. And who's the entity, or where do we start where all of these folks can be brought together with customers in the room that say, this is, for solar to get, to get deployed faster, it shouldn't require solar salespeople having to explain what their bills are going to look like after they go solar, right? It should just be a no-brainer, but we're a long ways away from that.
Right. Your story reminds me, Elizabeth Warren, who, fought those really complicated disclosure rules that the credit card companies had, where they, would bury these sort of hidden rate escalators in there, and she taught contract law at Harvard University. She says, I can't understand the credit card. So I think the same thing. I still find the way the bills are produced to be confusing. I have had a few meetings with PG&E in the past, and actually we've made it better on the solar bill. There's more to go there, but part of the challenge is just making it simple and understandable for people. I don't have, a specific recommendation on that, other than we did, back when I was in the solar industry, we actually did a collaborative process, along with, some of the ratepayer advocacy groups, by the way, just for the net metering bill, which used to be basically a commercial bill that was like 35 pages that you got every month, and it was totally indecipherable. In fact, I think Bill Kelly and I worked a bit on that back in the day. But no, you highlight a really important point, which is making it simple. We are going to be doing one thing at the Energy Commission, which I think will be helpful in this regard, which is there's a power content label, and there's been sort of different rules about how that's been applied. We're going to be making that much simpler with a one standard label that's required on every utility bill across the state, and that'll come out this summer, which I think should help a little bit.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Okay.